The rhythm of the heart monitor was the only thing telling me I was still alive. Beep, beep, beep. It was slow, too slow. My body felt like it was filled with bleed. I tried to lift my hand to ring the nurse's bell, but my fingers wouldn't move. The mysterious illness, as the doctors called it, had taken everything from me. My strength, my beauty, my life. Through the haze of pain, I heard the heavy oak door of my private hospital suite creak open. I couldn't turn my head, but I knew those footsteps. Is she gone yet? My heart stuttered. That was Julian, my husband. The man who had held my hand just an hour ago, weeping about how he couldn't live without me. But his voice now, it wasn't sad. It was impatient. Keep your voice down, a woman whispered. The nurse said she can still hear us. Clara, my best friend. My sister and everything but blood. She was here? She's in a coma, Clara. She can't hear anything, Julian scoffed. I heard the rustle of fabric, like he was checking his watch. God, this is taking forever. I have a meeting with the board tomorrow. I need to walk in there as the grieving widower and the sole heir. You mean we need to walk in there? Clara corrected him, her voice sharp. Don't forget who got you the pills. Do you know how hard it was to dose her tea every morning without her noticing? My breath hitched in my throat. The monitor beeped faster for a second. Beep, beep, beep. Relax, Julian laughed softly. I know, small doses. Arsenic mimics a natural decline. You were brilliant, babe. Poison. It wasn't a sickness. It wasn't bad luck. It was them. The tea Julian made me every morning before work. The vitamins Clara insisted I take for my skin. I just want it over, Clara sighed. I'm tired of playing the supportive best friend. Looking at her pathetic, pale face makes me sick. Soon, Julian promised. I heard the sound of a kiss wet and disgusting. Once that monitor flatlines, Crestview Holdings is ours. No more Elena, just us and our millions. Tears hot as acid leaked from the corners of my eyes. I wanted to scream. I wanted to sit up and tear their eyes out. But I couldn't. The darkness was closing in. I trusted you. I screamed in my mind. I loved you both. The rage burned hotter than the poison. I didn't want peace. I didn't want to go to heaven. I wanted to drag them down to hell with me. Please, I pray to whatever God was listening. Don't let me die like this. Give me a chance. Just one chance to make them pay. The monitor let out one long, high-pitched whine. Ness swallowed me whole. Ha! I gasped, my lungs filling with air so fast it hurt. I shot up in bed, my chest heaving, sweat soaking through my silk pajamas. My hands flew to my throat, clawing at my skin. I was choking. I was dying. Elena? I froze. The room was bright. Sunlight warm, golden sunlight poured through the curtains. I wasn't in the sterile white hospital room. I was in my bedroom. The blue duvet, the smell of lavender, the antique vanity table, it was all here. I grabbed my phone from the nightstand. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped it. October 14th, 2022. I stared at the screen. The numbers didn't make sense. 2022? I whispered, my voice raspy. That's 3 years ago. I scrambled out of bed and ran to the full-length mirror. I braced myself to see the skeleton I had become, the hollowed cheeks, the gray skin, the hair falling out in clumps. But the woman in the mirror was glowing. My skin was flushed and healthy. My dark hair was thick and shiny, cascading down my back. My eyes were bright, full of life. I touched my face. It was warm. I was solid. I'm back, I whispered, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. I'm actually back. There was a knock at the door. Elena, honey? Julian's voice. My blood turned to ice. It was the same voice I had just heard celebrating my death. Are you awake? He called out, sounding cheerful. Happy anniversary, darling. I made you breakfast. I looked at the closed door. I could picture him standing there handsome, smiling, holding a tray of food. Holding the poison, my hands curled into fists at my sides. The fear evaporated, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. I'm awake, Julian, I said, my voice steady and dangerously calm. I looked at my reflection one last time. The innocent, trusting Elena died in that hospital bed. The woman staring back at me now was something else entirely. You wanted my life? I whispered to the mirror. Try and take it this time. I took a deep breath before opening the bedroom door. The brass handle felt cold under my palm, grounding me. Showtime, I told myself. Downstairs, the smell of crisp bacon and fresh coffee filled the air. It used to smell like home. Now it smelled like a trap. Julian was waiting at the dining table, a small black velvet box sitting next to his plate. He stood up as soon as I entered, flashing that dazzling, boyish smile, the one that had blinded me for 3 years. "There she is," he crooned, walking over to kiss my cheek. I forced myself not to recoil, though my skin crawled at the contact. "Happy 3rd anniversary, Elena." He picked up the box and held it out to me, his eyes gleaming with expectation. "Go on, open it." I took it, my fingers barely brushing against his. I flipped the lid. A diamond pendant, shaped like a perfect teardrop, glittered under the chandelier lights. I recognized it immediately. In my past life, I'd eventually found the charge on my credit card statement, a massive expense I had foolishly ignored because I trusted him to manage our finances. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" Julian pressed, leaning in closer. "I wanted to get you something that matches your sparkle. I know how much you love diamonds." In my past life, I would have been in tears by now, throwing my arms around his neck and thanking him for being so thoughtful. Today, I just stared at the stone. It looked sharp, cold. "It's very shiny," I said flatly, snapping the box shut and setting it on the table. "Thank you, Julian." He blinked, his smile faltering. He looked like a puppy that had been kicked. "Just, thank you, Elena, that's a flawless cut." It cost a fortune. My fortune, I thought. "You bought me a gift with my own money to distract me while you stole the rest." I said thank you, I repeated, sitting down and reaching for the coffee pot. "Is the coffee fresh?" Julian stared at me for a beat too long, confusion knitting his brows together. "Yes, of course." Before he could probe further, the front door swung open. "Where is the happy couple?" A shrill voice echoed from the hallway. "Aunt Vivian." My father's sister and the biggest leech in the family tree. She swept into the dining room in a fur coat that cost more than a mid-sized car, her eyes immediately scanning the table for anything valuable. "Vivian," I said, not bothering to stand. "You're early for lunch." "I wanted to see the anniversary gift." She marched over, snatching the velvet box from the table. She gasped theatrically. "Oh, Julian, you spoil her." "Look at this rock." She turned her sharp, judging gaze on me. "You're a lucky woman, Elena. Most men wouldn't put up with a wife who spends all her time at the office while he waits at home." Julian chuckled nervously, pouring her a cup of coffee. "Now, Vivian, Elena works hard for the family." "Too hard," Vivian sniffed, sitting down uninvited. "You look haggard, dear." "Really, you should let a man handle the heavy lifting. You're going to age yourself prematurely. The company is too much for a delicate thing like you." I set my cup down with a deliberate clink. The sound echoed in the room. "I appreciate the concern, Aunt," I said, my voice silky smooth, "but someone has to work. We can't all rely on." "Luck." Vivian paused, her cup halfway to her mouth. "Excuse me?" "I saw your recent request for a loan from the family trust," I lied smoothly. I hadn't seen it yet, but Vivian was always begging for money. "And I heard about your bad run in Las Vegas last month. It must be stressful, relying on the roulette wheel to pay your mortgage." The room went dead silent. Julian choked on his toast, coughing violently. Vivian's face turned a mottled shade of red. I don't know what you're talking about." "That was a bad investment." "Of course," I smiled, a predator finally showing her teeth. "But since I handle the heavy lifting, as you say, I think I'll be denying that loan request." "We need to be fiscally responsible, don't we?" Julian looked between us, his mouth slightly open, panic flaring in his eyes. "Elena? Are you feeling all right?" "I feel fantastic, darling," I said, standing up and smoothing my skirt. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a company to run." I walked out, leaving them in stunned silence. I realized then that my silence hadn't been dignity. It had been permission, and I was done giving it. "Good morning, Mrs. Vance," the receptionist chirped as I swept through the lobby. "Miss Sterling," I corrected, not slowing down. "It's my father's name on the building." I left her gaping like a fish and marched toward the elevators. In my past life, I walked into Crestview Holdings with my head down, apologetic, feeling like an imposter. I used to think Julian knows better. Julian can handle it. Not today. My eyes scanned the bullpen of cubicles until they landed on a young man in the far corner. He was buried behind a stack of files, his tie crooked, frantically typing on a battered laptop. Lucas. I stopped right in front of his desk. He jumped, knocking a stack of papers onto the floor. "Mrs. Vance." He stammered, scrambling to pick them up. I'm sorry. I was just organizing the archive like Mr. Vance asked. Leave them, I said, my voice cutting through his panic. He froze, looking up at me with wide, terrified eyes behind thick glasses. He had no idea that in 7 years he would develop a software algorithm worth billions. Right now, he was just the invisible assistant everyone ignored. Grab your laptop, Lucas. You're coming with me. Where? To my office. You're my personal aide now. But Mr. Vance said I was supposed to. I don't care what Mr. Vance said, I interrupted, leaning down. Do you work for him, or do you work for Crestview? Do you work for me? Lucas swallowed hard. A spark of intelligence finally cut through his fear. He stood up, straightening his tie. I work for you, ma'am. Good answer. Let's go. I turned and walked toward the executive suite, Lucas trailing a step behind me like a lost puppy. When I pushed open the double doors to the CEO's office, my office, I wasn't surprised to see Julian sitting in my chair. He had his feet up on the mahogany desk, flipping through a thick blue folder. The Omega merger, the deal that was supposed to double our market share. The deal he had convinced me I was too emotional to handle in my past life. He looked up, his smile tight. Elena, what are you doing here? I thought you were taking a spa day. Get out of my chair, Julian, I said calmly. He laughed, closing the folder but not moving. Babe, you're being dramatic. I'm just handling the boring stuff so you don't have to. You know how stress affects you. I walked around the desk, standing directly over him until he was forced to swing his legs down and stand up. I asked you a question, I said, holding out my hand. The file. Elena, listen to me, he said, his voice dropping to that patronizing, soothing tone he used to manipulate me. He reached out to touch my shoulder. We talked about this. The doctor said you need to relax if we want to start a family. Do you want to risk that? Don't you want a baby? The old Elena would have melted. The old Elena would have felt guilty for prioritizing work over a hypothetical child. I swatted his hand away. I'm not an invalid, Julian. And I'm certainly not pregnant yet. Until I am, this company is my priority. I snatched the blue folder from his grip. I'm handling the Omega merger, personally. Julian's jaw tightened. A flash of genuine anger rippled across his face before he smoothed it back into concern. You're making a mistake. These investors are sharks. They'll eat you alive. Then I guess I better be hungry, I replied, opening the folder and ignoring him. Lucas? Yes, ma'am? Lucas stepped forward from the doorway, voice trembling but present. Escort my husband out. And then get me the financial records for the last 5 years. I want a full audit started by noon. Julian stared at Lucas, then back at me. His face flushed a dark, ugly red. You're auditing the company? Why? I looked up, meeting his gaze with a bored expression. Just standard procedure, darling, unless you have something to hide? He stared at me for a long, tense moment. The air crackled between us. Finally, he let out a short, disbelief-filled laugh. Fine, play boss. When you crash and burn, don't come crying to me. He stormed out, bumping hard into Lucas's shoulder on the way. Lucas stumbled but caught himself. He looked at me, eyes wide. Ma'am, the financial records, all of them? Every single dime, Lucas, I said, watching the door Julian had just slammed. We're going hunting. I saw Lucas straighten up, a newfound confidence in his posture. He nodded once, sharp and professional. I'll get them right now. As the door clicked shut, I sat in my chair, the leather still warm from Julian's body, and took a deep breath. He was annoyed. Good, annoyed people made mistakes. And I would be there to catch every single one. This risotto is incredible, Julian, Clara purred, tilting her glass of red wine toward him. You really have a talent for everything you touch. I watched from the head of the table, my fingers tightening around the stem of my own glass. The candlelight flickered, casting long shadows across the dining room. To anyone else, this looked like a cozy dinner between a husband, a wife, and their best friend. To me, it looked like a crime scene waiting to happen. You're too kind, Clara, Julian replied, his voice dripping with false modesty. I just wanted to do something nice. Elena has been difficult lately. I'm right here, I said, slicing into my mushroom risotto with surgical precision. And I haven't been difficult. I've been productive. Clara turned her gaze to me. Her eyes were wide and filled with that sickening, fake pity. Oh, Elle, we're just worried about you. Julian told me about the scene you made at the office today. Kicking him out of his own chair? It's the CEO's chair, I corrected her, taking a bite. And since I'm the CEO, it wasn't a scene. It was a correction. I saw movement in my peripheral vision. I glanced down just in time to see Julian's hand slide off his knee and rest on Clara's thigh under the table. She didn't pull away. Instead, she pressed her leg against his hand. The bile rose in my throat. In my past life, I had been so blind. I had thought they were just close friends. Now, seeing his fingers squeeze her leg while he smiled at me, I wanted to flip the table. You know, Elena, Clara continued, her voice lowering to a whisper. Stress can do terrible things to a person's mind. Remember what happened last year? You were so overwhelmed you forgot our anniversary trip. I didn't forget, I said coldly. Julian canceled the tickets and told me I got the dates wrong. Julian stiffened. He quickly pulled his hand back from under the table. I don't remember that. You're confused again, honey. See? This is what I mean. You're fragile. Clara nodded eagerly. Exactly. Maybe you should take a step back. Let Julian handle the finances for a few months. Just until you feel stable, I repeated, tasting the word. Yes, Clara said, reaching across the table to pat my hand. Her skin felt clammy. We just want to protect you. I looked at her hand, then at Julian's anxious face. They were so sure of themselves. They thought I was the same woman who would crumble at the slightest hint of criticism. I threw my head back and laughed. It was a loud, sharp sound that made them both jump. Protect me? I wiped a tear of mirth from my eye. Oh, Clara, you are funny. I don't need protection. I feel more powerful than I have in years. What? Julian asked, his brow furrowing. Elena, why are you laughing? Because you're talking about my stability, I said, leaning forward, my eyes locking onto his. And meanwhile, I spent the afternoon with the forensic accountants. Clara froze, her wine glass halfway to her mouth. Accountants? Julian asked, his voice cracking slightly. Why would you need forensic accountants? Oh, just a precaution, I said breezily, picking up my fork again. I've noticed some irregularities in the accounts. Money moving to shell companies. Strange withdrawals. I told the team to look for internal leaks. I paused, looking directly at Clara. We think someone close to the family is stealing from us. Clara gasped, inhaling a mouthful of wine. She started coughing violently, red liquid splashing onto the pristine white tablecloth. Clara! Julian shouted, half rising from his chair to help her, but his face had gone completely pale. He looked like he was about to be sick. Oh dear, I said, not moving an inch. Are you all right, Clara? You look like you've seen a ghost. Clara wheezed, her eyes watering as she dabbed at her mouth with a napkin. She looked terrified. I just went down the wrong pipe. You should be careful, I said, taking a slow sip of my wine. It tasted sweet. Choking can be fatal. Julian sank back into his chair, his eyes darting around the room as if the police were already hiding in the curtains. He didn't touch his food again. I, on the other hand, finished my entire plate. This really was delicious, Julian, I said, wiping my mouth delicately. But you look like you've lost your appetite. He didn't answer. He just stared at his plate, his hands trembling in his lap. I watched them both, Clara coughing, Julian sweating. For years, I had craved their love. I had wanted their approval. But looking at them now, paralyzed by their own guilt, I realized something important. Love had made me weak. Love had made me a victim. But fear? Fear was making me a queen. I found it, ma'am. Lucas's voice was barely a whisper, as if he was afraid the walls were listening. He slid the tablet across my desk, his finger trembling as he pointed to a highlighted row of numbers. Explain it to me, I commanded, though my heart was already hammering against my ribs. It's a shell company, Lucas said, adjusting his glasses nervously. Called J&C Consulting. Every month for the last 2 years, a consulting fee of $50,000 has been transferred from the operational budget to this account. The account is registered in the Cayman Islands. J&C, Julian, and Clara. They hadn't even tried to be creative. I stared at the screen. The numbers blurred for a second. That money was my father's legacy. It was the profit from the hard work of hundreds of employees. And Julian was using it to buy Clara expensive dinners and hotel rooms. A sharp pang of grief hit me, a ghost of the love I once held for him. I remembered how he held me when my father died, promising to take care of everything. He had been stealing from me even then. Mom? Lucas asked softly. Do you want me to call the lawyers? I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and crushed the heartbreak. When I opened my eyes, they were dry. No, I said, standing up and grabbing my blazer. Not yet. We need leverage first. Keep tracking it, Lucas. Don't let him know we know. Where are you going? To get a bigger weapon. Arthur Sterling's office was a fortress of glass and steel overlooking the city. He was a man who ate weak CEOs for breakfast. In my past life, Julian was terrified of him. Mrs. Vance, Sterling grunted, not bothering to stand up as I entered. He looked at the empty space behind me. Where is your husband? He usually does the talking. That is exactly why you've never invested in Crestview, isn't it? I asked, sitting down uninvited. Because Julian talks too much and delivers too little. Sterling raised a thick eyebrow, intrigued. He's a charming man. Charm doesn't increase profit margins, Mr. Sterling. Strategy does. And do you have a strategy? He asked, leaning back. Last I heard, your husband wanted to do a soft merger with Omega Corp. I told him it was a waste of my capital. I agree, I said, pulling a single sheet of paper from my bag and sliding it across his desk. A merger is weak. It splits the power. I don't want to merge with Omega. I want to acquire them. Sterling picked up the paper, his eyes scanning the bullet points. Hostile takeover? You want to undercut their supply chain? They are over-leveraged, I explained, my voice steady. If we drop our prices by 10% for 3 months, they will default on their loans. We buy them out for pennies on the dollar. Sterling looked at me for a long moment. That's ruthless. That's business, I countered. Julian was afraid of looking like the bad guy. I'm only afraid of losing. A slow grin spread across Sterling's face. He tossed the paper down. I like you, Elena. You have teeth. Julian is a golden retriever, but you're a wolf. Do we have a deal? On one condition. He leaned forward, his gaze intense. I invest $50 million, but the contract names you as the sole decision maker. If Julian Vance signs a single check or vetoes a single order, I pull my money. I don't do business with retrievers, I smiled, a cold, satisfied curve of my lips. Don't worry, Mr. Sterling. Julian won't even know about the deal until the ink is dry. Good, he said, extending a large hand. Welcome to the big leagues, Elena. I shook his hand. The grip was firm. For the first time since I woke up, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like the executioner. The grandfather clock in the hallway struck 10 as I pushed the front door open. The house was dark, except for the dim glow of the lamp in the living room. Julian was waiting for me. He stood by the fireplace, a half-empty glass of whiskey in his hand. His tie was loosened, and his eyes were dark with anger. Where have you been? He demanded, his voice slurring slightly. Working, I said simply, placing my keys on the console table. It was a long day. Working? Julian laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. Is that what you call going behind my back? Arthur Sterling called me Elena. He congratulated me on my wife's aggressive strategy. Do you know how humiliating that was? I walked into the room, keeping my expression soft and confused. I needed to play this perfectly. Humiliating? I asked, tilting my head. Julian, I did it for you. For me? He slammed his glass down on the mantelpiece. Liquid splashed over the edge. You cut me out of the biggest deal of the year. You made me look like a trophy husband. I made you look like a man with priorities, I countered, walking over to him and placing a hand on his arm. I felt his muscles tense under his shirt. Remember what Clara said at dinner? You've been so stressed lately. You looked so tired. I didn't want you to have to deal with Sterling. He's a bully. Julian blinked, his anger wavering. He is a bully. But I could have handled him. I know you could have, I lied, stroking his arm gently. But why should you? I wanted to take the burden off your shoulders. I wanted to be the supportive wife you always asked me to be. I took the stress so you didn't have to. Julian looked down at me, searching for any sign of deception. He found none. The tension slowly left his shoulders. I felt useless, Elena. You are never useless, I cooed. In fact, I realized today that we need more people we can trust in the company. Strangers like Sterling are dangerous. We need family. Julian sighed, rubbing his temples. I've been saying that for years. I know, I said, leading him toward the sofa. And I've been thinking about Marcus. Julian stiffened again. My brother? You hate Marcus. You called him a liability last month. I was wrong. I said, sitting down next to him. I was being judgmental. He's your brother. He's family. And if we can't trust family, who can we trust? In my past life, Marcus had been the final nail in the coffin for Crestview Holdings. He was an impulsive, arrogant drunkard who harassed staff and embezzled funds. I had fought Julian for years to keep him away. This time, I was opening the door for him. What are you saying? Julian asked, eyeing me suspiciously. I think we should bring him on board, I said, smiling warmly. The Director of External Relations position is open. It pays well, it has a lot of visibility, and he'd be the face of the company at events. Julian's eyes widened. Director? That's a VP-level role. You'd really let him have that? I think he deserves a chance to shine, I said. I think he deserves a chance to destroy you, I added silently. He's charismatic, just like you. Let him handle the parties and the press. It will give you more time to... Relax. A slow smile spread across Julian's face. His ego was stroked, his brother was validated, and he thought he had won. You really have changed, Elena, he said, pulling me into a hug. I knew you'd come around. Marcus is going to be great. He just needed a big break. I'm sure he will surprise us all. I whispered into his shoulder, staring blankly at the wall. I'll call him in the morning, Julian said excitedly, pulling away. He's going to be so happy. Finally, we're acting like a real team. Yes, I agreed, standing up. A real team. Where are you going? To bed, I said, turning toward the stairs. I'm exhausted. Saving the company takes a lot out of a girl. Julian laughed, raising his glass to me. Good night, babe. You did good today. Maybe you are cut out for this after all. I walked up the stairs, the sound of his laughter fading behind me. He thought he was getting an ally. He didn't realize I had just handed a lit match to an arsonist and invited him into our home. The explosion was going to be spectacular. Oh, Elena, are you sure? The tag says $4,000. Clara held the emerald green handbag like it was a holy relic, her eyes wide with faint hesitation. We were in the VIP suite of the city's most exclusive boutique. Champagne sat on a silver tray between us. Get it, I said, sipping my drink and forcing a smile. It matches your eyes. Besides, I haven't treated my best friend in ages. You really are the best, Clara squealed, the hesitation vanishing instantly as she draped the bag over her shoulder. I don't know what I'd do without you. You'd be broke and alone, I thought, but I just nodded. Go try on that silk dress I picked out. I want to see it on you. Clara disappeared behind the velvet curtain of the changing room. I sat back on the plush sofa, listening to the rustle of fabric. I knew exactly how to play her. Clara was motivated by two things, envy and greed. I had just fed the envy. Now I needed to feed the greed. So, Clara called out from behind the curtain, her voice muffled. How are things at home? Julian seemed intense the other night. He's just worried, I said, pitching my voice to sound weary. And honestly, Clara? I think he's right. The rustling stopped. Right about what? About me. About the company. I let out a long, heavy sigh. I'm tired, Clara. Fighting with the board, dealing with investors. It's draining the life out of me. I look in the mirror and I don't recognize myself. Clara stepped out. The dress was tight, hugging her curves perfectly. She looked beautiful and she knew it, but her focus wasn't on the mirror. It was on me. You do look exhausted, she said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. She sat down next to me, taking my hand. Maybe it's time to slow down. I'm thinking of doing more than slowing down, I whispered, leaning in closer. I'm thinking of quitting. Clara's grip on my hand tightened. Quitting, you mean selling the company? No, transferring it. I looked down at my lap, playing the part of the defeated wife. I'm meeting with the lawyers next month. I want to transfer full control of the assets and the CEO position to Julian. I just want to stay home and focus on being a wife. Maybe start that family he wants. I felt a tremor go through Clara's hand. It wasn't sympathy, it was adrenaline. Everything? She asked breathlessly. You'd give him everything? Everything, I confirmed. He's my husband. Who else should I trust? That's so noble of you, Elena, Clara said, her eyes lighting up with a predatory gleam. He's going to be so happy. You're finally doing the right thing. I hope so, I said. But keep it a secret? I want to surprise him. Of course. My lips are sealed. She stood up abruptly. I just need to use the restroom quickly. Do you mind? Go ahead. She grabbed her phone and hurried toward the back of the suite. She didn't go to the restroom. She stopped just inside the hallway, thinking she was out of sight. But the boutique had mirrors everywhere. I watched her reflection in the tall glass panel opposite me. She was typing furiously, a wicked smile twisting her face. She wasn't texting a friend. She was texting Julian. She's doing it. She was probably typing. We won. The money's coming. I took another sip of champagne, watching her celebrate her victory. They thought the war was over. They didn't realize I'd just led them onto a minefield. Enjoy the moment, Clara, I whispered to her reflection. It's the last win you'll ever have. Turn the volume up, Lucas. Lucas tapped the screen of the tablet. The sound of thumping bass and drunken cheering filled my office. On the grainy video, Marcus Julian's brother was standing on top of a bar counter, a bottle of champagne in one hand and a microphone in the other. You think Crestview is boring? Marcus screamed on the video, his shirt unbuttoned to his navel. My brother runs that place. We're buying Omega Corp next week. We're gonna crush those losers. We're gonna be rich. I watched the view count tick upward. 2 million views. He leaked the hostile takeover, Lucas whispered, his face pale. The stock dropped 4% in pre-market trading. Perfect, I said, standing up and smoothing my skirt. Ma'am? I said, prepare the boardroom. Lucas, it's time for an execution. The air in the boardroom was so thick it was hard to breathe. The 10 members of the board sat around the long oak table, their faces grim. Julian stood at the head of the table, sweating through his suit. It was a mistake, Julian stammered, his hands shaking as he gripped the podium. Marcus, he has a problem. We will get him help. I've already fired him. Fired him? Mr. Henderson, the chairman, barked. He violated SEC regulations. He announced a confidential merger to a nightclub full of people. The Omega deal is dead in the water because of him. I know, Julian pleaded, looking desperate. He turned his eyes to me, silently begging for help. Save me, Elena, like you always do. I stood up slowly. The room went quiet. The issue here isn't just Marcus's behavior, I said, my voice calm and clear. The issue is how he got the job in the first place. Julian's eyes widened. Elena, what are you doing? Lucas, I said, extending my hand. Lucas stepped out of the shadows and placed a red folder in my hand. I opened it and slid it down the table toward Mr. Henderson. This is Marcus's personnel file, I told the board, or rather the lack of one. There was no background check, no interview process. No HR approval. Elena, Julian hissed, taking a step toward me. Stop this. I ignored him, keeping my eyes on the chairman. The company bylaws state that all executive hires must be vetted by the board. This document shows that Marcus was appointed directly by the Chief Operating Officer. By Julian. Mr. Henderson flipped through the file, his face turning purple. Is this true, Julian? You bypassed protocol to hire your brother? Elena suggested it. Julian shouted, pointing a trembling finger at me. She told me to hire him. It was her idea. Did I? I asked, looking at him with cool detachment. Do you have that in writing? Because my signature isn't on any of these documents. Only yours is. The room erupted in murmurs. Julian looked around, wild-eyed. He realized the trap too late. He had signed the papers. He had taken the credit. Now he was taking the fall. This is negligence, Mr. Henderson declared, slamming the file shut. Gross negligence. I agree, I said. We cannot allow personal relationships to endanger this company. We have a fiduciary duty to our shareholders. Elena, Julian whispered, his voice cracking. Please, I'm your husband. I looked at him. I saw the man who had poisoned me. I saw the man who was currently planning to steal my fortune with Clara. In this room, I am the CEO, I said coldly. And you are a liability. I move for an immediate vote, Mr. Henderson said. To suspend Julian Vance from all executive duties pending a full internal investigation. All in favor? 9 hands shot up instantly around the table. Julian stared at them, devastated. Then he looked at me. I was the only one who hadn't voted yet. Elena? He choked out. I held his gaze for a long second, letting him see the nothingness in my eyes. I vote yes, I said. Motion carried, Henderson announced. Security, please escort Mr. Vance from the building. 2 guards stepped forward. Julian didn't fight them. He just stared at me, his mouth hanging open in shock as they let him out of the room he thought he owned. I sat down in my chair, the only one left standing at the head of the table. Now, I said to the stunned board members, let's discuss how to salvage the stock price. You. The heavy oak door slammed against the wall with enough force to crack the plaster. Julian stood in the entryway, his chest heaving. His suit jacket was gone, his tie was ripped loose, and his hair was wild. He looked like a man unraveling. I didn't jump. I didn't look up from my book. I sat on the velvet sofa in the living room, lifting my porcelain teacup to my lips. Earl Grey, hot, perfect. Are you going to pay for the wall repair? I asked calmly, taking a slow sip. Don't play games with me, Elena. He stormed into the room, kicking the coffee table so hard the wood splintered. You humiliated me in front of the entire board, in front of the staff. Henderson had security drag me out of the building like a common criminal. If the shoe fits, I murmured, placing the cup back on the saucer with a delicate clink. What is wrong with you? He leaned down, screaming right in my face. I could smell the sour scent of fear and sweat on him. I am your husband. You are supposed to be on my side. You are supposed to protect me. I did protect you, Julian, I said, finally looking him in the eyes. My gaze was steady, unblinking. For 3 years, I protected you. I covered for your mistakes. I ignored your laziness. And how did you repay me? By poisoning my life. He recoiled as if I had slapped him. Poisoning? What are you talking about? I made a mistake with Marcus. One mistake. And you destroyed my career for it. Is that the only mistake? I reached under the sofa cushion and pulled out the thick manila folder Lucas had prepared. I tossed it onto the table. It landed with a heavy, condemning thud between us. What is this? He snapped. Open it. He hesitated, his anger flickering into wariness. He snatched up the folder. As he flipped the first page, his face drained of all color. His hands began to shake. J&C Consulting, I read aloud, my voice cool and detached. Registered in the Cayman Islands. A shell corporation with no employees and no clients. Yet, for the past 2 years, you've been transferring $50,000 a month from the company's operational budget into this account. The papers rustled loudly in his trembling grip. Elena, I can explain. I'm sure you can, I said dryly. Embezzlement usually comes with a very creative explanation. It's not embezzlement. He threw the file down, desperation creeping into his voice. It was a rainy day fund. I was putting it aside for us. For our future. I wanted to surprise you with a vacation home in Italy. It was all for you, Elena. For me, I laughed. It was a sharp, humorless sound. Strange. Because my name isn't on the registration documents. Only yours is. Yours. And Clara's. He froze. His mouth opened, no sound came out. J&C, I continued, ticking the letters off on my fingers. Julian and Clara. Did you really think I wouldn't find out? Did you think I was that stupid? No. No, babe, listen. He dropped to his knees, grabbing my hands. The sudden switch from rage to begging was pathetic. She helped me set it up because she knows international finance. That's all. I swear on my life, Elena, I love you. I did this for our family. I looked down at his hands clutching mine. In my past life, I would have believed him. I would have wiped his tears and apologized for doubting him. Now I just felt disgust. I pulled my hands away and stood up, towering over him. Stop lying, Julian. It's embarrassing. I'm not lying, he wailed. We can fix this. Julian, shut up. My voice cracked like a whip. He snapped his mouth shut, staring up at me with wide, terrified eyes. Here's the situation, I said, my tone ice cold. You have stolen over $1 million from my company. That is a felony. It carries a mandatory sentence of 10 to 20 years in federal prison. He gulped, sweat dripping down his forehead. You wouldn't? I would. And I will. I walked to the side table and picked up another document, a divorce settlement. I dropped it onto his lap. Unless you sign this. He looked down at the papers. Divorce? Uncontested divorce, I clarified. You leave tonight. You take nothing. No alimony. No stock options. No house. You walk out of here with the clothes on your back. In exchange, I burn the evidence of the embezzlement. I won't call the police. You can't do that, he whispered, scrambling to his feet. I built that company with you. I deserve half. We are partners. You deserve a prison cell. I shouted, finally letting my anger break through. You stole from my father's legacy. You stole from me while smiling in my face. But Elena, what about us? He reached for me again, tears streaming down his face. We can work through this. I know you still love me. Think about us. I stepped back, looking him dead in the eye. There is no us. There is only me and the parasite I'm removing. The silence that followed was heavy. He stared at me, realizing for the first time that his charm had no power here. The game was over. You have 5 minutes to sign, I said, checking my watch. After that, I called the police. Did she get the message? I asked, staring at the glowing monitor on my desk. Sent 10 minutes ago, Lucas replied over the speakerphone. Anonymous tip. Subject line, Julian Vance is bankrupt and facing 10 years. I attached the fake indictment papers you drafted. Good work, Lucas. Let's see how true love holds up against poverty. I leaned back in my chair, watching the live video feed from the downtown apartment. It was a luxurious penthouse paid for by the shell company Julian had created. The hidden camera in the living room gave me a perfect view of the door. On the screen, the door flew open. Julian stumbled inside, his tie missing, his shirt soaked with sweat. He looked like a man on the run. Clara, he shouted, rushing toward the kitchen. Clara, we have to leave. Pack a bag. Clara walked into the frame. She was wearing a silk robe I had unknowingly paid for. She didn't look worried. She looked bored. Leave? She asked, crossing her arms. Where are we going, Julian? The Riviera? Or are we running from the cops? Julian froze. What are you talking about? I got an email, she said coldly, picking up her phone. It says Elena found the money. It says the accounts are frozen. It says you're going to jail. It's a lie. Julian stepped toward her, reaching out. She's bluffing. I just need to access the offshore account, and we can disappear. Access it then, Clara challenged, not moving an inch. Show me the balance. Julian's face crumbled. I can't right now. The passwords, she changed them, but I can fix it. I just need you to trust me. Clara laughed. It was a cruel, hollow sound. Trust you? Julian, look at you. You're a mess. You're penniless. I did this for us. He screamed, his voice cracking. I stole for you. And you got caught. She sneered. I don't date failures, Julian, and I certainly don't date convicts. Get out. Clara. Please, get out. She shrieked, throwing a vase at him. It smashed against the wall near his head. Before I call the police myself. Julian stared at her for a second, his heart clearly breaking in real time. Then he turned and ran out the door. I closed the laptop with a satisfied snap. Lucas, he's leaving the apartment. He'll be coming here next. He has one play left. 30 minutes later, the front door of our house clicked open softly. I was waiting in the shadows of the upstairs hallway, watching. Julian didn't call out my name. He didn't come to the bedroom to beg for forgiveness. Instead, he crept toward his study. I followed him silently, my bare feet making no sound on the carpet. Through the crack in the study door, I saw him frantically rummaging through the safe. He pulled out a thick document. The deed to the house. It was the only asset solely in my name that he hadn't touched yet. He slammed it onto the desk, grabbed a pen, and pulled out an old birthday card I had written him. He was studying my signature. He took a deep breath, positioned the pen over the transfer of ownership line, and began to write. Make sure you loop the E, I said, leaning against the doorframe. Julian jumped so hard the pen flew out of his hand. He spun around, his eyes bulging. Elena, I didn't hear you. I walked into the room, glancing at the paper. Forgery, Julian? Really? You're adding another felony to the list. I wasn't. He stammered, trying to cover the paper with his body. I was just organizing papers. Move, I commanded. He didn't move. I said move. I shoved him aside. There it was. Elena Vance, written in shaky ink. It was a terrible forgery. I tried to give you a clean way out, I said, looking at him with pity. I offered you a quiet divorce, but you just couldn't help yourself, could you? I need money, Elena, he sobbed, sliding down to the floor. Clara threw me out. I have nothing. I just wanted the house so I could sell it and start over. I pointed to the corner of the ceiling. A tiny red light blinked on the bookshelf. Smile, Julian, I said, my voice dangerously low. You're on camera. He looked up at the lens, then back at me, realizing the depth of the hole he had dug. You set me up, he whispered. No, I corrected him, picking up the forged deed. I just turned the lights on. You're the one who decided to steal while everyone was watching. I pulled my phone from my pocket. What are you doing? He gasped. I'm calling the police, I said, dialing 3 numbers. You rejected the settlement. Now you get the consequences. The blinding flash of camera bulbs washed over me like a tidal wave as I stepped onto the podium. Hundreds of reporters were crammed into the hotel ballroom, their microphones creating a jagged hedge at the front of the stage. Mrs. Vance, over here. Miss Sterling. Is it true the merger is off? I raised a hand, silencing the chaos with a practiced grace. I wore a white suit, sharp, clean, untouchable. Thank you for coming, I spoke into the microphone, my voice steady and amplified through the speakers. I know there have been rumors regarding the stability of Crestview Holdings. I am here to set the record straight. Elena. A commotion erupted at the back of the room. The heavy double doors swung open, banging against the walls. Julian stood there, disheveled but trying desperately to look composed. He fixed his tie and marched down the center aisle, forcing a smile for the cameras that immediately swiveled toward him. I'm here, he announced, waving at the press like he was a celebrity. Sorry I'm late. My wife started without me. He bounded up the stairs to the stage, grabbing the side of the podium. He leaned in close to me, his voice a hiss only I could hear. What do you think you're doing? You don't speak to the press without me. I don't need permission to speak about my company, Julian, I said, my voice projecting clearly over the sound system. I didn't step back. Julian laughed nervously, addressing the crowd. Everyone. Please forgive Elena. She's been under a tremendous amount of stress lately, medical stress. Sometimes she gets confused. A murmur rippled through the room. He was playing the hysterical wife card. In my past life, I would have shrunk away, humiliated. Confused? I asked, turning to face him. Is that what you call it? Honey, let's go home, he said, reaching for my arm, his grip bruising. We can issue a joint statement later. You're making a scene. I agree, I said, pulling my arm free. We should issue a statement, right now. I looked out at the sea of reporters. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Vance is right about one thing. There are changes happening. Effective immediately, I'm assuming full executive control of Crestview Holdings. What? Julian stepped back, his fake smile faltering. Elena, stop. Furthermore, I continued, my voice cutting through the air like a scalpel. I have filed for divorce this morning. The room exploded. Shouts, gasps, and the frantic clicking of shutters filled the air. Divorce? A reporter from the Times shouted. On what grounds, Miss Sterling? Julian grabbed the microphone, his face red. This is a private matter. My wife is having a breakdown. There is no divorce. On the grounds of financial misconduct and embezzlement, I answered loudly, leaning into my own mic. Silence slammed the room. Julian froze. He looked at me, his eyes wide with terror. Embezzlement? Another reporter yelled, Mr. Vance, are you under investigation? No. Julian stammered, holding his hands up. That's absurd. I've dedicated my life to this company. The forensic audit was submitted to the district attorney an hour ago, I said, pulling a folded document from my pocket and holding it up. Mr. Vance has been misappropriating funds for 2 years. This is the official receipt of the filing. You promised, Julian whispered, his voice trembling. You said if I signed the papers. I said if you signed, I wouldn't call the police, I replied, my voice cold enough to freeze hell. You tried to forge my signature instead. You made your choice. Mr. Vance, is it true? Did you steal from your wife's company? Are you facing jail time? The reporters surged forward, ignoring me and surrounding him. They thrust microphones into his face, shouting questions that tore his reputation to shreds in seconds. Julian looked around wildly, trapped. He looked at me one last time, pleading. Elena, help me. I can't, I said, stepping back from the podium. I have a company to run. I walked off the stage, the heels of my shoes clicking rhythmically against the floor. Behind me, the flashbulbs didn't stop. They were capturing the exact moment Julian Vance ceased to be a man and became a scandal. I didn't look back. Elena. My poor, brave niece. Aunt Vivian's voice grated on my ears as she swept into my study uninvited. She held a bouquet of cheap lily, her face twisted into a mask of exaggerated sympathy. "I saw the press conference," she gushed, trying to maneuver around my desk to hug me. I stepped back, heaping the heavy oak furniture between us. "That horrible man. To think he was stealing from you right under our noses." I always knew there was something shifty about his eyes. "Really?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "Because last week you told me I was lucky he put up with me. You said I should let him handle the finances so I wouldn't age prematurely." Vivian froze, clutching the flowers to her chest. She laughed nervously. "Oh, darling, you know how I am. I was just trying to be traditional. I wanted your marriage to work. But now that he's gone, we can focus on family. You girls have to stick together. Is that why you're here, Vivian? To stick together?" "Of course." "And well." She cleared her throat, her eyes darting to my checkbook lying on the desk. "With the chaos of the divorce, my monthly stipend seems to have been delayed. I have bills, Elena, the club membership, the lease on the Jaguar." I picked up the checkbook. Vivian's eyes lit up with greed. "I'm glad you came," I said, dropping the checkbook into the shredder beside my chair. The machine whirred loudly as it chewed up the paper. "Elena," she shrieked, "what are you doing?" "Cutting the dead weight," I said calmly. "There will be no more stipends, Vivian, no more loans. No more bailouts. You can't do that. I'm family." "Family doesn't pray for my downfall," I replied, pointing to the door. "Get a job, Vivian." "I hear the boutique where you buy your furs is hiring." She gaped at me, realized I was serious, and stormed out, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. I let out a breath and looked down at my phone. It vibrated against the wood. "Clara, Al, please pick up. You have to listen to me." "Clara, he manipulated me. I didn't know he was stealing." "I was a victim too. Clara, I miss you. Please don't throw away 10 years of friendship." I stared at the messages. A month ago, they would have broken my heart. Now, they just looked pathetic. She didn't miss me. She missed the access. She missed the parties. She missed the clout of being the CEO's best friend. I didn't type a response. I didn't demand an apology. I simply tapped the block contact button. The screen went dark. I didn't need to destroy her. Without me to fund her lifestyle and Julian to validate her ego, she was already a ghost. 2 hours later, I sat in a conference room that smelled of lemon polish and stale coffee. The door opened and his lawyer walked in, followed by Julian. I almost didn't recognize him. The charming, handsome man who had smiled while handing me poison was gone. In his place was a man who looked 10 years older. His hair was unkempt, his eyes were sunken and rimmed with red, and his suit hung loosely on his frame. He sat down opposite me without saying a word. He didn't look at the lawyers. He just looked at me. "The terms are as discussed," my lawyer stated, sliding a thick packet of papers across the table. "You relinquish all claims to Crestview Holdings, the marital home, and the assets in the joint accounts. In exchange, Miss Sterling will not pursue further civil damages regarding the embezzlement, though the criminal case is out of her hands." Julian picked up the pen. His hand shook violently. He signed the first page, then the second, then the last. He pushed the papers back. It was over. "We're done here," I said, standing up and smoothing my skirt. "Goodbye, Julian." "Elena." His voice was a rasp, like he hadn't spoken in days. I paused, my hand on the doorknob. "Yes?" He looked up, tears pooling in his eyes. It wasn't manipulation this time. It was defeat. "Did you ever love me?" he asked. "In the beginning? Before the money, before everything. Was any of it real?" I looked at him. I remembered the wedding day. I remembered the laughter. I remembered the tea he used to make me. "Yes," I answered honestly. "I loved the man I thought you were. I loved him with everything I had." A flicker of hope crossed his face. "But that man never existed," I finished coldly. "He was just a mask you wore to rob me." I opened the door and walked out into the bright, clean hallway, leaving him alone in the cold. "Careful, that coffee is hot." Lucas handed me the paper cup, his fingers brushing mine for a split second. I didn't pull away. I didn't flinch. I just smiled and took a sip. "Perfect," I said, feeling the warmth spread through my chest. "Just the way I like it." We were walking through Central Park. The trees were exploding with the colors of autumn red, gold, and orange. In my past life, I had spent this autumn in a hospital bed, staring at a gray ceiling, wondering why my husband never visited. Today, the sun was shining so brightly I had to squint. "So," Lucas said, falling into step beside me. He had traded his ill-fitting shirts for a tailored blazer. He looked confident. "I just got the email from Sterling. He wants to double his investment for the next fiscal year." "Double?" I laughed, kicking a stray leaf off the path. "He told me last week he was worried we were growing too fast." "That was before he saw the Q3 numbers," Lucas grinned, adjusting his glasses. "The acquisition of Omega Corp is complete. We're up 40% across the board. The shareholders are calling you a visionary. They used to call me a figurehead," I reminded him. "People change their minds quickly when they see results," he said softly. He stopped walking and turned to look at me. "But you haven't changed, not really. You just woke up." I stopped too, looking at him. Lucas had been there through the ugly parts. The late nights with the forensic accountants, the screaming matches with the lawyers, the public circus of the divorce. He had never asked for anything in return. "I didn't just wake up, Lucas," I said, watching a group of children chasing a kite nearby. "I was reborn. I had to die to figure out how to live." "Well," he said, a shy smile touching his lips. "I'm glad you're here. The company wouldn't be the same without you." I wouldn't be the same. There was a weight to his words, a promise of something that didn't need to be rushed. In my last life, I had chased love so desperate to be filled. Now I was full on my own. "I'm glad I'm here too," I said honestly. We continued walking until we passed a high-end department store. The window display was filled with mannequins wearing designer gowns, but I didn't look at the clothes. I looked at my reflection in the glass. I expected to see the scars of the last 6 months. I expected to see a tired divorcee. But the woman staring back at me stood tall. Her shoulders were back, her chin was high, and her eyes were fierce. She wasn't a victim of poisoning. She wasn't a scorned wife. She was the CEO of a multi-million-dollar empire. She was a woman who had rewritten time itself to save her own soul. "Elena?" Lucas asked, noticing I had stopped. "Everything okay?" I looked at the reflection one last time. I saw the ghost of the old Elena fading away, waving goodbye. I didn't need her anymore. I didn't need revenge anymore. The best revenge was standing right here, breathing, thriving, and free. "Everything is perfect," I said, turning away from the glass. "Ready to head back to the office?" Lucas asked, checking his watch. "We have a meeting with the tech team at 2. I smiled, feeling the sun warm my face. "I'm ready for anything," I said. "Let's go."